So this is the first in a series of video tutorials showing you the Aspekt Platform. In this one we're going to go over the basic tools that you're going to use, the workflow you're going to use, and then we're going to create a 2 or 3 screen experience just to show you the basics of what it's capable of. But before we jump into that, you probably want to know what Aspekt is. Aspekt is a publishing platform not unlike Adobe DPS or Mag Plus. It lets you create magazines, books, other types of user experiences such as retail experience, kiosks, what have you, using Photoshop and publishing to tablet. Now the difference between Adobe DPS and Mag Plus is that those two platforms are geared towards taking print publications and shoehorning them onto a tablet device. Aspekt comes from the other angle, where you are designing specifically for the tablet experience and the tablet experience only. So the tools, the workflow are quite similar between all three platforms. We use Adobe Photoshop for building our experiences. Adobe DPS and Mag Plus use Adobe InDesign. And again, that's coming from a historical print perspective. And we are trying to sort of do away with that. We want the people using our platform to think of the tablet first, the experience that they can generate on the tablet, and we feel that once you see the platform in action, you'll agree that it certainly is on the user experience front miles ahead of these other two platforms. So to begin, let's just talk some basic terminology. When you're publishing through Aspekt, you've created a publication. Magazine is the analog to what we're talking about, but it could be a book, it could be a kiosk installation, it could be anything. And each publication has issues, which is content that comes out on a periodic basis. So we're going to create an issue, and the first step in creating an issue is using Aspekt Issue Builder. Now this tool just lets you define the metadata around your issue, define the features or stories within the issue, media collections, stuff like that. You'll actually use Photoshop to actually build the content of your issue, or, and again this is a difference between Adobe DPS, Mag Plus, and us, is that you can actually create issues without using Photoshop. You can use a text editor and whatever image editing software you feel comfortable with. Photoshop is much faster, and there's nothing that you can do in the Photoshop plugin that you can do editing straight away. So we've launched the issue builder here, and we're going to create an issue. So we're just going to go up to File, New, and we're going to give it a title. We're just going to call this Sample, and we're going to give it a product ID, and this is internal for your use managing your publication. Each issue is made up of features and collections. We're not going to go over collections in this video. We will do that in a later one. But you should know that each issue consists of multiple features. And you can think of features as an article, a story, what have you. Each issue has one default feature called the table of contents. This is a convention that we use. You can't get rid of the table of contents. There always is a table of contents. But in our example, we're building an issue that has only one feature. There are no sub-features. There's no real table of contents. It's just going to be one thing. So what we're going to do here is rename this and call it our feature, because we only have this one single feature. So this is all we have to do to get started in Photoshop. We just need to save this, and we'll save it in our issues folder. We'll create a new folder, give it a file name, and click Save. And that's all we need to do with Issue Builder right now. If we come over here to Finder and we take a look in the sample folder that we just created, these are all the files that Issue Builder generates for us when we first save the project. There's the actual document, which is this thing right here, and then there are two Sublime projects and workspaces. This is for if you were editing the issue by hand, or if you needed to go in and make some fixes by hand. Sublime is a text editor for OS X that we use internally, and we like it a lot, so we've baked in support. And just sort of show you what I'm talking about here, I'm going to open up the Sublime project in Sublime, and you'll see over here we have everything that's over here. Uh, we can come in and we can edit all this CSS and XML by hand and set it up that way if we like, but we're not going to do that. But I just wanted to show you how this works. This assets folder is where all of your content for your issue goes. All your features, media collections, XML, CSS, images, video, HTML, whatever, it all goes in this folder. Now if you're doing this issue by hand, you can arrange this folder however you like. There's no convention to it whatsoever. But if you're using the Photoshop plugin, it's best just to leave this folder alone because Photoshop expects things to be in certain places. So we can actually quit out of Issue Builder and then go straight into Photoshop. And this plugin that we've written works both in Photoshop CC and Photoshop CS6. It's a little bit faster in CC, but not enough to dissuade you from not using CS6. Functionality is identical. So we're going to launch Photoshop here and get started. So the Aspekt plugin is actually a panel that appears in your interface here. And here it is starting up. So the first thing we need to do is create a new document. So we're targeting the iPad, and you always want to design for iPad Retina if that's your target, and the iPad Retina resolution is 2048 by 1536, and we want to make sure that we turn off color management. So we've created our blank document here, and the first thing that we need to do once we've done that is load the project that we created with Issue Builder, and that's right here, sample.aspekt, and we'll just open that up. So we have that open here. We see we have our feature selected, and then we have all of this stuff, all these panels and buttons and text fields, and we'll get into that in a second. But we need to talk about the convention of setting up your Photoshop document. So Aspekt works on the premise of screens. Your feature that you're building here in Photoshop may consist of one screen, it could consist of 30 screens. Aspekt doesn't care. The way you structure your Photoshop document, though, is that all of your top level elements are screens, and they should be Photoshop groups. So we're going to do 3 screens. So I'm going to create 3 groups here. I'm going to put that in there. Now the first thing I've done, I've created these 3 groups. I need to tell Aspekt that these things are screens, and then the contents of these groups are actually what shows up on the screen. So all I have to do is come here and set the layer type to screen, and then I want to give it a name. And in Aspekt, you need to give everything a unique identifier, and there's a lot of reasons why, but the key reason is that you might be referencing one layer from another layer when you do more complicated interactions. And when you build these things, the unique file name, everything needs a unique file name. So this is screen 1, so I just call it S1. It's pretty simple. And then here we'll set that to screen and set the name to screen 2, S2. And then we'll set this to screen and S3. So this is definitely not going to be a demonstration of my design chops. It's just a demo of the basics of using this. So we're actually just going to use images from Mac OS X, the desktop wallpaper things. Actually move this out of the way. So we have 3 screens here, and we need to have backgrounds for each one of these screens. So I'm going to drag in 3 images, and we're going to go with a space theme. I'm just going to scale this up to fit. So we've loaded up our 3 backgrounds here, and now we need to assign them to the right screens. So screen 3, screen 2, and now screen 1. Now if I were to come down here and click build and preview, the simulator would launch, but it would be empty because we haven't told Aspekt that these things are indeed backgrounds or images. So we're going to do that right now. So we're just going to select the image, set the layer type to image, and then export JPEG. Because there's no transparency, it's an image. You'll save some space by exporting as JPEG. And then we'll give it a unique identifier, and we'll do the same for the rest of these backgrounds. Now we can come down and click build and preview, and you'll see Photoshop is doing some stuff here. It's exporting everything. We're designing for Retina, so it's exporting Retina and non-Retina at the same time. And then once it's done, the simulator launches with the preview application so that we can see what's going on here. So here are our 3 screens, our 3 backgrounds. Pretty boring. We're going to jazz this up with some other elements. But you can see how quickly we got from nothing to something. So we're going to quit out of the simulator right here, and we're going to focus on this first screen here. So we're going to turn off these layers right now. So this is going to be the first thing that the user sees. So there's one thing that I forgot to do is check preload. Now preload just tells the Aspekt system to load this before it displays anything. By default, Aspekt loads all the assets in a background thread so that it's more responsive as you flip through it. So we check preload, and now we're going to add some titles to this. This is the first screen, so there's a title. Make it bigger. Change the font, make it heavy. And we're going to want to give this probably a drop shadow because of the white text, just so it pops out a little bit. There, that's good enough. And then let's add a subtitle. Make this bigger. Add a drop shadow. Change the font. And then I'm just aligning these so they're all centered correctly. So now again, if I hit build and preview, the title and the subtitle won't appear because I haven't told Aspekt what they are or how to treat them. So we have 2 options here. We could export them as a label, or we can export them as an image. Now we're going to choose image because if you export as a label, it gets a little bit more complicated. Your viewer is going to have some custom fonts installed. It's a little bit more work than just exporting as an image. And typically the only time you want to export as a label if you're doing localization within your issue. Aspekt supports publishing a magazine in many different languages from the same source. I don't believe Adobe DPS or Mag Plus can do that. So I've set this to image. Now we're not going to export as JPEG because we have transparency and a drop shadow. So we want that to be a PNG. So I want to give this a name. And this image. So now if I hit build and preview, there we are. Okay, so this is kind of boring. That's not really what I want. Aspekt uses a parallax sort of animation system so that you can animate your transitions as you go from screen to screen. Now, it might sound like a fluffy feature, but it really, really enhances the user experience, and it's something that Adobe DPS and Mag Plus don't do, and it would take them a long time to implement so that you can do it. But Aspekt was built with this in mind. In fact, that's the reason Aspekt was built in the first place. So let's jazz this up a little bit. I think the first thing that we want to do is we want to do something with the background. So that since this is the first screen, I think what I want to do is blur it so that you can read the title better. But when you swipe, have it fade out to the crisp image in the background. So what we're going to do here is duplicate this. We're going to come back to screen 2 here, and we're going to drag this here. I'm going to turn this on, and we're going to delete this background that we added because we want this one to be it. So we need to rename this so that it matches up. So just S2 background. Ba-boom. We're going to turn this off for a second and come back down here and add a Gaussian blur. So that looks cool. That's nice. And then when we swipe, that blur will go away, and then we'll be left with this fairly amazing photograph. So how do we do that? So this is a little bit advanced, probably a little bit more advanced than I should have probably gotten straight away, but it is pretty simple. Now there's a few things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is make sure our backgrounds don't move. Let me just build and preview this real quick, show you what I mean. So we want this to stay in the same place. We don't want it to scroll. So what we're going to do, come back here, select the background, and go to the Basics tab. And up at the top we have this motion panel. Horizontal speed tells Aspekt at what speed this element is supposed to scroll. Now a speed of 0 means scroll as fast as the user is scrolling, meaning add 0% to the scroll speed. To make things stay in place, we want to set this to -1, which is negative 100%. So 100% minus 100% is 0. So this will now stay in place as we scroll. Let's export this again, and you'll see, voila, no movement. We need to repeat that for this because this is going to give the illusion that this image is fading or transforming into this other image. Now the other thing we have to do is turn off clipping. I wish I would stop quitting the simulator, but I can actually show you what I mean by clipping. So you see that clear line between the sharp in focus image and the blurred one. That's clipping, and we need to turn that off. So in the background here, and this is a little bit confusing, but once you do it a few times you'll get the hang of it. If you're going forward and you want we want this background image to last for 2 screens, the current screen and the next screen. And so when you're moving into the next screen, you're going to set the container width, which is the clip width. And because we're designing for the iPad is 1024 units wide. Retina, non-retina, it's the same, 1024. So we're going to set this to 2048, which means 2 screens, and then 768 for the height. So now this image will be displayed in position for 2 screens. Now for this, it's the other way around. We're going to turn off clip contents because this image actually exists on screen 2, but we want to show it on screen 1. And there's a technical reason why it's this way, but it's just something that you'll learn quite quickly. The other thing that we need to do with this is make sure that it shows up underneath these titles right here. So we're going to select that, and we're going to choose Insert Before S1 Title. So an Aspekt builds the display. It builds from back to front. So that means that everything is sort of stacked on each other. So this background is actually on top of everything else. And what we're telling it with Insert Before is to change the Z order, to take this background and actually insert it here in the display list. So let's build and preview. And so what will happen when the simulator launches is the sharp image here is visible. So what we're going to do is we're going to fade into this image, and we're going to do that by going to the Fade tab. We're going to select the background for screen 2, and we're going to select Fades and Fade in. Now if we build and preview, you'll see the blurred background, but as we scroll, see how it fades? It's very nice. Now if we were doing this for an actual something that we're putting in the App Store, I would not necessarily do it this way. I would use video for the transition. The video animation of the blur is different than you're going to get with the fade, but it just sort of shows you what's possible. Now let's add some motion to the titles here. So we're going to come in here and select the titles to show you sort of the parallax engine that we're working with. So these are set to scroll as the user scrolls. So let's make the title scroll faster, 25% faster than the user scrolls. But the subtitle, I'm sorry, we want the title to scroll faster and the subtitle to scroll slower. So we're going to set this to negative 0.25. So now it'll scroll at 75% of the speed, and the title will scroll at 125% of the speed. And we will build and preview. And there you see that nice parallax. We need content for the second screen now. So let's just add another label. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to move this down. And let's put a slideshow here. We'll just kind of show you how easy that is. So we'll just take some more images. We'll just do 3 of them. We want it about that big. You don't have to be too precise with this step because we're going to mask this. I'm just going to create. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mask this, but I created this layer for the mask so I could center it and get everything correct. We're going to delete this layer in a second. So I'm going to come here, I'm just going to add a layer mask, do the same for this, and the same for that. Now I'm going to delete this. I'm going to group this, and I'm going to set this to slideshow. And we'll call this S2 slideshow. And then move this here. Now, a slideshow, again, slightly different than the way Adobe DPS or Mag Plus do this. A slideshow in Aspekt, you can actually, any element that we support, and we support a lot, images, buttons, videos, video layers, HTML, labels, you can even embed another slideshow in it. Any object that you create with Aspekt can go inside a slideshow. You're not just constrained to images, which lets you do a lot of cool stuff. But we're just going to do images, so just S2 slide 1, image, S2 slide 2, S2 slide, slide 3. Now come over here to the slideshow settings. We want it to autoplay. Tap to play means that they can touch it and it'll stop playing, and they touch it again and it'll resume. Allow swipe means they can swipe with their finger to scroll through quicker. And then slide transitions, and there are a few, and we're working on some more as well. Slide interval means it'll be on the screen for 3 seconds. And now the slide delay lets you delay when it starts playing. So you could do a cool effect where the screen is maybe split up into 4 different slideshows, and then you could offset each one, by a quarter, and then you get this really cool thing. So we're going to do a dissolve, and we're going to autoplay. And we're going to make sure that we export JPEGs on this as well. Now we can turn off S1. We don't need to rebuild this one. So as you're building these screens, if you turn off the visibility, Aspekt won't export them. We've already built it, we don't need to do it again. So we're only working on this one. So we're just going to build this out. And here's the simulator. And here's our slideshow. I could come in and swipe and go through it faster. And there's that lovely parallax. Beautiful. Alright, so that's the first 2 screens. Let's work on this 3rd screen now. We can turn this off because we're not going to use that. Let's flip this into place. So right now it's sliding on, but let's do the fancy stuff and flip it. Now because we have clipping turned on this layer, flipping it is going to look really strange, but let's just see it in action. Slideshow, and then whoa, crazy. Now we could turn clipping off, but we don't want to do that because we're going to have to use some more advanced techniques to do that. So instead we're going to fake it by using a fade. So fade start and fade end just says start fading when we're 85% of the way through the transition into the next screen, or 50% or 0%, whatever you want to do. We're going to fade in and out, And that's all we should need to do, and this should look pretty good. Scroll in. Okay, so maybe we want this fade to start a little bit earlier. No problem. So we'll just come back here. Yeah, there we go. That's good. So that demonstrates sort of the basic workflow of working with Aspekt. As you can see, it's pretty simple. If you were to do this with HTML5, you'd spend a better half of a day doing this, and it wouldn't be as smooth or as fast. You can't do this with Adobe DPS or Mag Plus, simply not possible. You could do it straight in native code, but again, you're going to be spending quite a bit of time doing it. One other thing that I want to show you rather quickly is previewing on the device straight from Photoshop. So there's a preview application that comes with the tools for Aspekt, and you can install it through the App Store on your iPad. And let me just get Reflector running here, and I will get AirPlay working. So there we go. Oops. And it's this Aspekt preview thing. So it's launched and it's waiting, and what we can do here is we pop down here, and there's my iPad, Boba Fett. I am a Star Wars fan. And now, oops. Photoshop is a hog. So here it is on the iPad. Looks the same. Responds the same. And you can see it didn't even take a minute to get it from Photoshop to my device. Maybe 15 seconds. So quick development, both on the desktop simulator and on the actual device itself. So that's it for this video. We're going to do a whole series of them, getting more and more complicated as we go, and showing you more and more elements that you can create with Aspekt, such as HTML, video. We have two different kinds of video that you can use in an app. Collections, triggers, actions, buttons, global elements. There's all sorts of complexity that you can add quite simply using Photoshop plugin. And then the very last tutorial that we do will actually do a real entire issue of a magazine, just to show you what doing 15 screens takes.